Disclaimer: the information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
And thank you again, Alex, for being with us. And please join with me in sending a round of welcome to Alex for being here and continuing to share his understanding of this plasma technology with all of us. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Mark. Thanks for bringing us here to this point. And let's see if I can get this done properly.
It played perfectly.
I guess I have to share it one more time. We'll try.
We're still seeing the disclaimer. I would imagine you just go to your next slide. There it is. We see it. Perfect.
And Happy New Year, everybody. We are going to continue on with the series, and thank you very much for allowing me to continue to present. This is part of the North American team meeting, and as I've said, it's a very powerful meeting because we have so much representation from the other continents, and we get a chance to talk about things that we don't necessarily talk about in other venues. So please enjoy the trip. This is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings on plasma science. We're talking about basic transmission, and today's topic is nearness. My name is Alexander. I'm from Canada. It is January the 7th in the year of 2024. So we have continued on with the basic series and trying to advance the knowledge so that we can distill the thousands of hours of teaching, because we have thousands more to teach. And they don't need to go through all the years of learning that we have gone through. That was our choice, and that was very necessary, so that we can accumulate that knowledge and process it. But now we have to figure out a way to convey that knowledge to others. And there are many ways to do it. There's no right way to do it. So we are embarking on a course here to clearly differentiate between what does it mean to be in the physical state, and what does it mean to be in the plasmatic state. And so we have tried a different approach in discussing basic transmission, because we still have this problem with this, what we call the donkey hesitancy, because we are actually, in the terms of physicality, in the lowest energy state. But in that energy state, we're finding strange things can happen. So for instance, we know that rolling along is faster than walking. And of course, we can do jumping and flipping and all sorts of other things. And so all of this has to do with the fact that we are talking about the plasma science and trying to understand it better, and carrying on from the presentation in the books of Marin Tevakoli Keshe, such as book number 1, The Universal Order of Creation of Matter. And the thing is that we see all of these fields gather together and create another field. And once you have this one field, and how do you get to the other field? And that's described in book number 2, the structure of the light. And we think we understand the structure of light, but not really. Because when we get into book number 3, we see the real problem begins with the origin of the universe. And we wonder if that should be book number 1. And we all need to find out that there's more to learn. Except that we already know this. So what is the problem? The problem is really our point of view. And so new sessions have begun on a monthly basis, the transmutation preparation sessions. So every month from now, in January 2024 to June 2024, we will have a progression in learning how to do these things. And as I say, it's not a matter of learning, it's a matter of practicing what we already know. And of course, the first thing to practice what we already know is to understand that we are one nation, one planet, one race. And as Rick Crammond, who's been hosting that for 307 sessions, has been trying to bring together that there are others on this planet, there are others in the universe, and some are 8 to 10 feet tall, and some are warm and fuzzy. And so we have to see that this universe is very, very interesting. And it's more to it than just our point of view. Because our point of view is still searching for outer space. And all we have is this place, this little tiny red dot in the bottom right-hand corner, which we call Earth. And we say, well, that's part of man's universe. And that's all we've been able to gather. But if we want to look at the rest of the universe, we have to gather more binding energy and get on that plasma highway to that pie in the sky. And where exactly is that? And so we will be continuing down the plasma highway, but we see that that highway is operating differently from the transmission highway that we're talking about today, because there are limitations. And so that limitation has to do with the understanding of our universe embodiment. And so a lot of it has to do with our basic teachings, which has to do with the speed of light. And so a lot of people believe that the speed of light is the fastest transmission. And we question that, if that's true. And a lot of people believe the faster you go, the bigger you get. And is that true? Because clearly, if we are the dominant universal embodiment, and we see how large and vast the universe is, then we are the universal embodiment, aren't we? And so the question is, how do we go from our little tiny perfect world to the universal world? And so we must obviously get very, very big. And how do we get there? Well, there are various ways to travel. And so we are currently on the Earth space embodiment. And on that embodiment, we are in our man space embodiment. And there's some talk of flying saucer embodiments. And then there's other talk about other types of embodiments. And so things are changing. And part of the thing that is driving that change, of course, is to understand how the universe is created. So fundamentally, the universe exists from energy. And so since energy is always in motion, to determine that motion, we have to put a charge on it. So the energy is a charge in motion. And if it's in motion, then it has to go from somewhere to somewhere. And so when we look at the cover of book number 1, we see that the energy has come together. And it's come together into something. But where did it come from? And now that it's here, where is it going? So we keep asking more and more questions. Well, there are scientific ways of discussing things, and there are practical ways of discussing things. And because we're so physically bound, we are looking for practical applications. And one of those was given to us, the cups of life. And the main reason for that introduction was because of the pandemic. But they weren't the cups of the pandemic. They were representative of the emotional strength of our inner space. And as such, many of us were producing ganses. And so these ganses were a manifestation of a radiance that was present in that particular environment. And so that environment is unique. And the person who was creating the cup of life is also unique. So all of us are the same, but all of us are unique. And so that is kind of a little bit confusing. But the thing is that is what gives us the high quality of life. And so we have to understand that that diversity is very, very important. And so the question becomes is how do we all get along? And sometimes you got to go along to get along, but there's also you can roll along. But there's a problem with the rolling along perspective with respect to the x-axis transmission, because what you have to do is you have to align yourself perpendicular to the ground and then roll along on the ground. But you can roll along on the ground by being pushed with a motor, or you can roll along on the ground by going up and down a hill. So the question is that the only way that we can do x-axis transmission? So we find that we can also spin along. And we're still going perpendicular to the ground, but now we're spinning 360 degrees. And so depending on your point of view, and you say, well, maybe, you know, we're just a circle, but if you keep spinning around, that circle becomes a sphere. And so the mathematics involved is basically the same because it involves pi. And so today we're going to have a little special session because one of the knowledge seekers had a nice Christmas present, and he wanted to share with us a pizza pie. But this pizza pie is not for eating. This is a toy. And so we're going to have some fun with this toy. And what it is magnets. These magnets are round magnets, but they're flat. And they are covered in plastic. And as you can see here, that we have three different colors. We have green, red, and blue. And they were laying out in a field. And as you can see, they're very stable. But there is a gap between each magnet. And the gaps seem to be quite uniform. And so they are of a certain distance, and this distance represents the maximum nearness that we can get and still maintain stability. So what we're looking at here is a very stable environment. But as you can see on the right-hand corner, there is a hand that's creeping in. And it has another magnet. And it is changing the nearness distance. And so something is happening. And so before we get into discussing what is going to happen, let's review what a charge is. So charge is either negative or positive, and you see that the negative charge is the giver and the positive is the taker. And the negativeness is based on the surface to volume ratio. And so the higher the surface to volume ratio, the higher the negative charge. So this affects the strength of the charge, and it affects the energy in motion. And so that energy can be flowing or binding. So let's see what happens. So as the hand is pushing in the other magnet, it's pushing the other magnets in between. And since they're all of the same charge, they repel. And like we've seen from the musical chairs, as they come towards the center magnet has to do something. It's obligated to do something. And in this case, it's jumping. And in the process of jumping, it affects other magnets. And so it changes the nearness of them. And they start jumping. And so magnets are jumping together, and they were originally all face up at, let's say, a negative charge, but then they were flipping. And in order to flip and come together, they had to reverse the polarity because opposite poles attract. And so that flipping process began a perpendicular realignment. So some of the magnets ended up going on the end. Some of them were jumping, and others were gathering together. And it seems like they were gathering together randomly, and well, yeah, kind of randomly, because the colors were spaced randomly. And then there was more flipping. So what we found, more magnets were coming together. So the same process, the jumping and the flipping, but then we seen that there was a binding that was building up, and that all had to do with the change in the nearness. So the greater the nearness, the greater the binding, and the more binding there was, the greater the nearness. And the reason for that, of course, is that as you get all of these magnets coming together, then they created a binding, and then other magnets continued to be jumping because this binding strength was increasing, and other bindings occurred. So in this picture, we have two bindings, one significantly larger than the other. And as a result, because of the flowing strength, those bindings came together and now became even stronger. And so this is a representation of how energy can be binding and flowing. Because in order for the binding to increase in strength, the energy has to come from somewhere, and that energy is moving, then it's flowing. And so then we have other bindings, and of course, now the main binding energy is very, very strong. And so, of course, it also is dominating the field capture, which is what we talked about last week. So we have all these other magnets here, and now we're capturing them as well, because through the nearness of the binding, we have increased our binding energy, and we can capture more. And so now we start to see some of the blue straggler magnets coming together. And also in the same process, because the initiator of the whole transaction was this hand that was hanging on to this one magnet. And of course, it was not participating in the change of the nearness and the change in the binding. It just initiated it. But now there's a reaction. And that reaction is that there's a realignment in the binding energy. And so what we see is going to shift over and be attracted to the original binding force. And now the remaining magnets are trying to make some choices here. Which end of the binding do they go to? And so as they are jumping and flipping and trying to make a decision, something is causing them to come together. And so, of course, the last blue straggler is looking, well, how is he going to join this whole thing? So he decides to join another binding. But look at the gradient difference. The main binding is so vast and so large that there's just no way that small one can stay. And so what it does is it joins the main binding. But now we have a polar orientation towards the initial finger that caused the change. And at this point, there's a release and it allows. And so we have the completion of the binding. And so what we're seeing is the maximum binding, and we're seeing the maximum nearness. We simply cannot get these magnets closer together. And we cannot get them more tightly aligned. And since they're all in one universal row, uniform row, they're all working together and binding each other. And as you can see by the colors, they're all mixed up. So now we have a situation where the shape has changed. Each of these magnets was round. Each of these magnets was basically the same size. The only thing that was different was the position. But each was of the same polarity because they were repelling. So now that we've changed the shape, what are we changing? Well, we're still changing the surface to volume ratio because now we have endpoints and a long section. And so the endpoints have a higher negative charge. And so when we look at the second case, and so here we have a pattern where the magnets are obviously nearer together. And the reason they're nearer together is because they are polar opposites. So some are positive, some are negative, but it's like a checkerboard. And so they've created a pattern. And it's an interesting color pattern, so very artistic, but no rhyme or reason really. It's uniform. It's, in fact, it's symmetric, except for this tail. This tail is kind of amino acid-like. And there's that finger again. And there's another bunch of red magnets there. And something's going to happen. And so once the first magnet is moved, then there's a chain reaction. And we describe that as being protein-like, to be different from amino acid-like. Because the amino acid is in a chain, but the amino acids fold over to create protein. And as we recall, in the functioning of manufacture of protein, in that folding process, we also create water. And so speaking of water, here we have a wave. And a wave is coming and rolling through. And it's basically being created with the binding energy by the shrinking nearness, as was described in case number 1. But now, because there's so many magnets there, and because it is coming from an angle, we're looking at multiple bindings. And so all of these bindings are now working individually, and they are in different strengths. But frankly, they're substantial, each on their own. And as they continue, we see that there's a lot of folding going on until the whole pattern gets consumed. And so when we look at this pattern, that's a result of the binding, we see that there's a lot of conclusions that we can make about positioning. So we see instances of parallel binding. Different bindings remain independent of each other, and they line themselves parallel to each other. Others are perpendicular to each other. They still have this binding. And in some cases, we have a heavage because it has to allow for some magnets that are caught underneath. And so in order to maintain that binding strength, it kind of has to curve over them. And then we also had cleavage, where some of these binding energies come together and they don't exactly fit. There's a gap, and it's a cleft. It's a strange gap. It's an angular binding. And so we see some of the bindings are converging and others are diverging. And then others are changing their orientation, which means that if they're going from positive to negative, they would have to be going from negative to positive to be able to align next to each other. Because if they were aligned in the same orientation, then they would repel each other. So this change in binding orientation changes the binding strength. But each of these bindings has a strength. So what we're looking at is the aggregate of all of these bindings and the strength therefrom, all of the bindings. And so we have a representation of the aggregate binding strength. And as you can see, it's affected the positioning of everything. So some things are in their position because they're locked in. They can't go anywhere. And the reason for it is they don't have the field strength to break through the binding of the field strengths that are around them. And so we get a pattern. And it's an arbitrary pattern. And it all started with one flipping magnet. And so we have to understand that each of these magnets is basically representing the same field strength. So all of these magnets that have the same field strength, unlike in case one, where they all came together and created one binding, now we have different selection of bindings and different orientations. So all of this came about through field capture. And so we've seen that there was x-axis transmission that was parallel to the ground, but there was y-axis transmission because it was perpendicular to the ground. And so as these two transmissions came together, they created this field, and then more magnets came together. And as more magnets came together, they changed the position. As they changed their position, they changed the field strength of that position. And some of them, in order to participate in that, had to spin. And so that affected the change in position as well. So let's look at case number 3. Case number 3 has 3 rings. A green ring in the center, a blue ring, and then a red outer ring. And there's that magic hand, that guiding hand is bringing in another green magnet. But instead of coming from the outside and pushing in, it is coming from above and coming down. So this is creating a different situation. And so what we are going to see is like birds flocking together. And so we see grouping. And as before, this changes the field strength. And so now in the center, this center circle became a group field. And of course, it's a lot stronger than the original magnet that the hand dropped. So we have a field that's in the center. We have the blue ring and we have the red ring. And so each one creates a field. And so these fields are overlapping fields, but they're all part of the same overall field. And so we see this segregation happening because all the green magnets got together. But now we have a different process of selection. And that selection is going to be based on nearness. And that selection is going to be colorblind. Because you see, we have a binding strength in the center that is way stronger than the original binding strength. So the original binding strength brought all the green magnets together. But now that all the green magnets are bound together, that creates a different binding strength. And so it extends out to the next field. So this nearness selection broadens. More grouping develops. And the binding strength increases. And as it happens, we see there's a symmetry in this binding. But now we have radically changed the field strength of that center binding. And practically every one of the red magnets is now jumping and flipping. And there's going to be more flocking. But as you can see, the binding energy in the center is also jumping and flipping. And so as things are jumping and flipping around, they're flocking and grouping together. And in that process, the field strength is changing. And so we find that on one side here, due to the nearness and the positioning of the binding energy, the red magnets on one side have all gathered together. Because the nearness is different on the other sides, the red magnets haven't gathered together with the main binding energy, but have chosen instead to bind in smaller groups. But now as that is growing, we find that there's a radical change in the nearness. And as that comes together, and it comes together much more quickly because the energy is stronger, and so we see a change in the shape. And so in the middle there, we see some heavage. And there's no magnet that's stuck underneath. It's just the way they come together so quickly. But as each magnet keeps coming together, we see that a more straightening out, a better orientation. And then that straggler, well, it doesn't know what it's doing. It is completely flipping all over the place because the field strength is changing dramatically. And so we come into a conclusion here where we have an asymmetric anomaly. So before this last one comes into play, if we count in the center, we have 5 green magnets. And away from the center, we have 2 groups of 5 blue magnets. And if we look on the left, we have 6 red magnets. But the group on the right has 7 red magnets. So this is not very symmetrical. And if we say based on the surface to volume ratio, the ends would be negative. But if we go through and assign a negative to the one on the left, we come to the center axis and we assign that as positive, and we carry on to the right, we find at the end there is positive. So this is kind of not working. And what's Buddy there going to do? And so what we find, we have solved the asymmetric anomaly, but now we have a symmetric anomaly. So based on surface to volume ratios, we can say that both ends are negative. But as you can see, there are 8 red on the right and 6 on the left. So then we can say that the positive core is not in the right place. So if we understand path link, there's a couple of things we have to understand. As each magnet has a magnetical and gravitational pole, when they come together, they combine together as one to have a magnetical gravitational pole. And so we have a path link. But this is a two-way street. And so this is important to understand. So let's review case number 3 again. Let's look at the maggrav polarity. So we find that it really is symmetric insofar as based on the number of magnets, by moving the center core one magnet over, we can maintain that positive charge. And based on the surface to volume ratio, we can see that the ends are still negative charge. However, that does not account for the maggrav polarity. This is another anomaly. So how do we get this maggrav transmission? Because all of these magnets are the same. And we know for a fact that if we were to add another magnet, that it would either attract or repel depending on its polarity. So if that is the case, then would that be the same true if we took a magnet on the left side and if it repelled on the left side, and then that took that magnet over to the right side without flipping its polarity, would it repel on the other side? And of course, the answer is no, it would attract. Because one side is magnetical and one side is gravitational. So what we're seeing here with respect to these magnets is we have a few observations. One is that we have the maximum nearness. These magnets cannot get together any closer in their physicality and still maintain their shape. We also see that the collective energy of all of the magnets together have created the maximum binding. Because within this field, there's nothing else to bind to. So they all bind to themselves. Since they bind to themselves, there's no motion. If there's no motion, how could the negative give and the positive take? So now we have a potential giving. That's part of the MAGRAPH transmission. And then we have the other conclusion. The two negative charges are not the same one. So when we say 1 + 1 is more than 2, we have 1 on one side, we have 1 on the other side, but they're not the same. They're not the same one. Because if they were the same one, it would be impossible to have this MAGRAPH. Because you would only have binding energy. And you see, energy can be binding or flowing. And so if we want to understand matter plasma dimensions, we have to understand that there's a physical dimension and there's a plasmatic dimension. And there's a difference. And the limitation that man is facing is that we are feedback dominant. And so everything that we've seen with the magnets coming together is a feedback from the reaction that happened from that magical guiding hand that either pushed the magnet in from the side or dropped the magnet in from the top. Or in case number 2, with the amino acid-like tail, flipped it over and began a folding process and created a protein-like reaction. So now we understand that we're in the post-November 11, 2023 era of choices. We have choices. We not only can enjoy this bountiful space of Earth space, but we can enter the transmutation space of outer space. And all we have to do is find that graceful space of our inner space, that greater oneness that we've been trying for 519 Knowledge Seekers workshops. It's 519 Thursdays in a row, where we are transcending the limitations of nuclear science and understanding that this is the Keshe Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings on plasma science, welcoming all the beautiful knowledge seekers. Yes, there's a world peace treaty. Sign it with a pen, sign it with your soul, and sign it meaningfully. Because all spacemen, snowbirds, and sports fans can find heaven through the transmission of perpendicular motion with the guidance and nearness of perpendicular rotation. See, the nearness changes of the binding forces of field capture has the potential for motion. And that potential can only be fulfilled because the plasma science needs to continue to be delivered daily in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new outer space age. Thank you very much for allowing me to present today. Hope you enjoyed the trip.
Well, thank you, Alex. The trip is over already. That was a short ride. Did I get my money's worth on that one?
No refund, sorry, buddy.
The potential for motion. I know Mr. Keshe has been talking about moving in the dimension of the energies, but not moving the physicality anywhere. I don't know how this relates to that. I'm not getting a clear picture of what you were trying to convey here.
So
Myself.
the majority of population knows that something is wrong, right? So how do we get them to move? They all have the potential to move, but we are all acting like frogs on lily pads, or little dolls and warm and fuzzy. We don't want to move. We don't want to change. We're quite happy with the status quo. But the status quo has not brought peace on earth. And so it's time for a change. I have a little treat for you.
Oh,
I
good.
can
We like
share.
treats.
We can share something else. So let me see if I can get this done. We have to share the screen again. We'll do that. And let's see if we can get this done. And we'll share the screen again.
I think you're already sharing the screen. Okay.
Are you ready?
Go right ahead. Yeah, we see it.
Set. Oh, I hope this works. It didn't last week, remember?
So is this showing when the knowledge seekers reach that point of enlightenment, it'll create a spark which will cover the entire of humanity? I remember that
I
was
think you can say that.
said. We
I
just
think you
need,
can say that.
go ahead. I didn't hear you, Alex.
I said, I think you can say that.
And again, we're not going to be moving them on the, are we moving them on the physicality level or on the soul understanding or both?
Well, did you notice that finger? Do you want me to play that again?
Yes.
Let's try this one more time. Watch the finger. Oh, that's it.
Yeah.
Is it moving? Is the finger moving?
No.
No. It only moved one time. Watch the finger. Oh, that went so fast. The finger dropped one green magnet.
As Mr. Kesh said, he could change this planet with the flick of a finger, but since he's not from this planet, he cannot do it. Or it would appear as magic, and we wouldn't hold it. Because we have to find a way to do it ourselves.
There in the top right-hand corner.
Yeah, I see. Is that a stack of magnets too that he's pushing there?
He's just flipping the one on the outside. It's like a fuse.
The red one, right?
He's only flipping one. The hand is gone.
Yeah.
So I think kids will understand this a lot better. This is a great toy. It's a great educational tool. As you can clearly see that the color of the magnets had nothing to do. So for all the racists out there, that is a non-issue.
Now, did these magnets join, did all the blues join together and all the greens join together, or did someone forcefully put it that way for the example?
So let's try this again to answer your question. So we have a green center ring, a blue outer ring, and the far outer ring is red. So based on nearness, since they're all flipping and jumping, and is based on field strength, the green one in the center is getting stronger. It is because of that increase in strength that it can draw the blue magnets together. And based on nearness, it's going to draw the blue magnets in before it draws the red magnets in.
And these are all magnets of basically the same strength?
Right. They are the same strength. And so clearly we can see that the color doesn't matter. The color is just for entertainment. Spice. It's the way humanity is. We're all different colors. But based on our, shall we say, grouping, so in certain parts of the country, there's a prevalence of dark races, there's a prevalence of Chinese races, there's a prevalence of white races. So we find that that is the prevalence there. But when people start to travel, then you start to get mixed colors. But the fact of the matter is that they're all the same. So anybody who is basing their prejudice on race is following the incorrect philosophy. The magnets prove that. This is proof in living color. So it all has to do with the nearness. And then it has to do with the alignment and the polarity, where opposites will attract. But then it also depends on field strength. So as the field strength increases, then the influence increases. And as you can see, the rate of change also increases. But this is the case where all the magnets are the same. But that's not the way life is. We have different people with different field strengths. Just like we have different planets with different field strengths, right? So the point is that if you're looking at the charge and you're saying, well, is it positive or negative? Doesn't matter, does it? It's just a matter of understanding energy and motion. And the difference in physicality is we have this rigidness. So when we get into this binding, we have now created an orientation that is very specific. So if we see that for sure, they can't both ends can't be negative. They can both have a negative charge, but that negative charge is not the same. So if we were looking at the human body, and we say the tips of your fingers are negative, the tips of your toes are negative, the top of your head is negative, and your ears are negative, and your nose is negative. Then we can say conclusively that all of these are different, and yet they're all negative. So it all depends on the field strength and the nearness. And as you can see how things came together, it was well organized. It wasn't chaotic at all. It just seemed chaotic in case number 2, but in case number 3, it's very well organized. It could only be better organized if one of the ones on the right-hand side of the red group would have flipped over on the left-hand side, and then it would be perfectly symmetrical. But it would be symmetrical in appearance, but not symmetrical in field strength and orientation and MAGRAV polarity. So it is primed and ready with the full potential to move. And if the field strength is sufficient enough, it will do that. And so clearly we can see that there's a limitation to the physical movement. And that's why we're only dealing with basic x-axis transmission. This particular toy was discussed about 33 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry. It was discussed 1970. No, I think it was even before that, 1968. It was a profound time. So close to 60 years ago. And I say it was a profound thing because it changed the course of NASA and it changed the course of a lot of companies, because we just failed to understand these kids' games. This is a practical lesson.
Would anyone like to ask a question or make a comment on this? Is this what a one planet race looks like?
No, I think it would look more like this. I think it would look more like this. It'd be a lot of fun. And what would be really good here is you don't have to worry about going into any one of these groups. If each binding was a group, you don't have to worry about going in there and not being part of that group, because there's an assortment of colors. So you can stay with your own color, or you can intermingle with other colors, because we're all part of the humanity family. But what is most instructive here is you're not part of the cockroach family. You're not part of the pig family. You're not part of the cauliflower family. You're part of the humanity family. So the nearness of the energy binding is based on the family. And if that is true, and I'm saying that it is, that means from wherever you came from your family, and wherever you go, you will go to your family. And you can rest assured and feel secure that you won't be able to miss the target.
Well, we do have a question in the Q&A from Syed. Would you like to open your mic, Syed? Do we need nuclear fission? Do we need nuclear fusion and fission in the future as we have new knowledge? Plasma, question mark. And secondly, I read somewhere that magravs have unlimited potential because they are connected to universal soul. Is this true? I can link the web page on demand. Thanks. So do we need nuclear fusion and fission in the future as we have new knowledge? Plasma.
So there's two ways to answer that question. First of all, the plasma science transcends the limitations of nuclear science. So you could say in that case, no. However, my contention is that the physicality is a feature of the humanity. We're abusing that feature. So in reality, entering the outer space age does not need us to dispose of everything that we know. See, because that's only part of the connection. That's only the one-way street. Understanding our physicality is a feature. It's a bonus, and it's something that is we should cherish. But that is a feature in the physicality. What we're lacking is an awareness and understanding of our plasma reality, because it's the plasma reality which is the substructure of our physical reality. What I'm trying to demonstrate with these magnets is that the magnets are a physical materialization, and the coming together of the binding forces was initiated by an external force, a guiding hand. So understanding how that guiding hand operates will help us understand our physicality and the purpose of our physicality. Let me just review that question again.
It's in the Q&A.
Well, yes, and they are connected to the universal soul. The universal soul being that guiding hand. So we're looking at the result. So there was a hand in here that flipped the first. That started the wave. And that hand could have been anywhere, but what clearly demonstrates here that he only needed to flip one magnet. Because as soon as he flipped one magnet, that changed the field strength. So that impacted the nearness. So something that would have been too far away based on the field strength, by increasing the field strength, in relative terms, it made it nearer. So the stronger you are, the nearer everything comes to you. So when we get into the plasma reality, which is the strongest field strength, then everything is really near. The nearness changes. Thanks, Syed. So, Mark, we look at this North American team meeting. Okay, we represented from different continents. We're different, represented by different nationalities, right?
Oh, yeah.
We all come together. There's a binding strength that transcends the distance, transcends the nationalities, transcends the time zones. So there's a common denominator. So the color is not it. The color is not integral to the binding field strength. And what transcends the distance is the field strength of the binding energy. And so this group is very small, but the binding strength is very strong. So the size really doesn't matter in that regard. The shape doesn't matter too much either, because we can have polar orientation, right? We can change our alignment. And so if we understand that the physicality is the lowest energy strength, and the soul energy being as part of the highest strength, and the higher strength feeds the weaker strength, then it only stands to reason that we need to focus on the guiding hand. And that guiding hand is within us. Each of us has the power over that guiding hand. So we make the choices. This is the beautiful part about the plasma science. We make the choices. So color doesn't matter. Financial doesn't matter. Status doesn't matter. But your inner field strength matters. And all of us have that same inner field strength. And the reason we know that is because we were all born to this planet. And we were not born to Mars or Jupiter. And why? Because our field strength had to have a nearness to the field strength of Earth. The Earth's field strength, for our purposes, was stronger than Mars' field strength. So we can get to Mars if we want to. But we have to do it the way we came to Earth. and that's in peace. We came in peace, we have to go in peace. And so we find that one of the reasons that we came to Earth is because Earth needs our support. As soon as we all realize that, then things will change. And that field strength of change will also change in its rate. And then you'll find the mixed cultures that we have on this planet will all come together. But it won't be boring. Are you still there, Mark?
Yes, would anyone else like to join the discussion?
Hi, Mark.
Yes, go right ahead.
Hey, Jefferson.
Thank you.
Hey, Alex. Hello, Mark. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this experiment. It was very nice, Alex. And I was just wondering, I don't know if I can formulate a thought, but in that table that all the magnets were standing in the gaps, and you move your finger just a little bit, can we consider to be all this stable, just like the inertia of our planet, and the movement of your finger would be like a cosmic array from the hydrogen, or the string from the universal line, or the principal line, that can make that movement inside our inertia of our planet in the magnetic field, because it creates a new element, a new, for instance, you just move, just like a ray. It changes everything. It join because they have the same strength, but if they had a different strength, they would create different materials or different gases, you know. And do you believe, how would this experiment be in the vacuum condition? How would they react? That I was just wondering. Thank you very much. But I think this was very, very interesting. Would it be the first class, the first teaching? So it would be easier for us to understand, maybe. Thank you, Alex. I don't know if I made myself clear in the position from the receiving a cosmic ray like your finger, just that created this new plasma in the physicality in this planet inertia. That's it. Thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Jefferson, the question that you ask is very important. And the way you asked it is a clear demonstration of what all of us need as knowledge seekers, because the whole purpose of this exercise, at least in my mind, is for us to be better teachers. And so there are things that we need, such as terminology. We need some knowledge, obviously, but we also need some practical analogies that we can refer to. And the thing about it is that we're all seeking a better way to really describe the same thing. So if we're looking at the hand that's bringing the magnet, that is in a plasmatic field, isn't it? Because that hand is a guiding hand. And so without that guiding hands, the magnets are not going to move. But what we have to understand is that even though that these magnets are not moving at this point in time, they have the potential for motion because they are in a balanced mag-grav condition of stability. But it's not a mag-grav condition in a vacuum because it's visible. If it was going to be in a mag-grav condition in a vacuum, then it would be non-visible. And the reason for that is because then it would be in a different dimension. So we know that inside the hand, for instance, is a vacuum condition. And we know that this toy, in interacting with this hand, is in an earth space condition. We know that outside of earth space is in a vacuum condition. So the physical manifestation is not in a vacuum condition. The impetus for the motion travels through that vacuum. So in other words, the inertia that you're talking about, which is a plasmatic manifestation, and if it goes to the lowest energy state, which is the physicality, then it becomes a materialization. But the energy is constantly flowing. The energy is always in motion. So even though each and every one of these magnets is stable, they are still moving. And this is the thing that we have to see. We have to see that these magnets are in constant motion. So what does that mean? That means that if we change the field strength, not only could the magnets move, but the magnets could go to another stage and totally disintegrate. Because it's this constant motion that is participating in their stability, continues to maintain their physicality and the nearness of the neighbor. And it's the position and the nearness of the neighbor that contributes to the stability as well. So if we say that the guiding hand is bringing in a hooligan, well, it really made a lot of things happen, didn't it? Right? So one magnet just came in, and it didn't even come in all the way. It just came in to push one magnet, and then all of this happened. And you can see that the magnet is not moving. The finger is holding on.
Yeah, it's almost like what Einstein said, if you turn one atom, the rest of the atoms turn as well. I know Mr. Kesh has quoted that, and this is the part of this new Tomorrow video, I think, as well, that Lisa made. That
Well, that's
uses
exactly.
yeah. So this is a good example of just one atom turning will cause the rest to turn, and that's where our position comes in, I guess, like atoms in a way. It may not happen as fast as this, but the process will continue.
Well, we can certainly change the rate of change, but what you want to notice is that this is well organized. It is not chaotic, and it's done in peace. No one got hurt. The finger is still there. The guiding hand is still there. But, you know, in that case, the guiding hand was interfering because from a point of view of the field, the guiding hand is not part of the field. The magnets are within their own field. So really, the guiding hand, you could say, is a foreigner, is foreign to this field. So it was intervening. But, you know, the magnets in their physical state are of the lowest energy state. So unless something changes, nothing's going to change. But what would happen if, for instance, instead of bringing in another magnet, if the table was tilted? So like the car was rolling down the hill. The motor wasn't driving. There was no guiding hand, but there was still transmission, motion, x-axis transmission. So if this table was tilted, it's clearly demonstrated that only one would have to move and all the others would adjust their position. And again, it would be well organized. So that's the difference between, the chaos and the organization, between the hooligan and the peaceful alignment. It's just that within the stability of the physicality, we have certain limitations on what we can do. But if we get into the plasma reality, which was operating on the level of the guiding hand, then our limitations are uncapped. There's no cap on the limitations. We're unlimited. And then when we say we're unlimited, well, the universe is unlimited. I mean, look at it. It's all over the place. And we're not there, not in our physicality. But we are there in our dreams. And now we're on the verge of understanding that our dreams can become the reality as well. But it doesn't have to do with, transcending, whether it's nuclear or gamma rays or whatever. What it is being aware of the way things really are and looking at things properly and understanding that by enhancing each other, we are gathering field strength. And then we can do everything and share in the bounty of this universe. That's what we want to do. And why not? What's wrong with that picture? Peace and prosperity as opposed to war and misery. I don't even know why that's a debate.
So this guiding hand, is this like introducing a universal messenger to the situation that unifies the entire structure into one unit, basically?
So
Isn't
yes,
that
that's
the
a
process going on, the unification of the unicos?
yeah, but it's not to make it boring, okay? Because you're only looking at one example. So this is for education purposes. It's a demonstration. But when you look at the rest of the universe and you see there's diversity, okay, there's a spice of life. There's the different structures and life becomes diverse and exciting. If you're wondering, where do we get all the different varieties of plants, or the different varieties of animals, or different varieties of insects? And, are there different varieties of people? I think if we're looking at the different varieties of the other families, I think, we'd be kind of safe in coming to the assumption that there are different varieties of humanity. And it isn't just related to color, because here we have clearly an example of different colors, and they're all coming together because it's all part of the magnet family here. Plastic coated magnets, that's all part of one family. But if we were to introduce another magnet, a bigger one, how would that change the picture? It would still be part of the magnet family, wouldn't it? And the YouTube is filled with experiments using magnets. And the magnets come in all different sizes. So the different sizes affect the rate of change. They give us variety. And they're lots of fun. Lots of fun with games with magnets. So the magnets are in the physical realm, but the magnetical is in the plasmatic realm. And the big difference is the rigidness. So you're looking at the physicality, the alignment of all these magnets are very rigid. So there's heavage, there's cleavage, there's angular relationships, there's parallel relationships. Well, when we get into the plasma reality, we don't have these limitations. See, this isn't a skill that we need to acquire. This is a skill that we already have. You cannot exist without using that skill. Because like these magnets, they exist with the energy in motion. You exist with the energy in motion. Whether you acknowledge it or not, you cannot maintain your physicality without energy in motion in you, around you, through you, over you, around you, however you want. That's what maintains your stability. And the earth does the same thing. So what does that mean? That means the context of this physicality has to take in the context of the environment and its physicality. So our stability is based on the earth's stability in this context. So can our stability be maintained the same in another environment? So we are faced with the prospect that the answer is yes, but we're faced with another prospect, and that answer is that we don't necessarily have to maintain in our physicality. So we're only talking about the basics here right now, so that we understand energy in motion and what is possible. And so when someone tells us, you know, this is the way it is, or this is what is possible, you have the tools to make a decision based on yourself. You don't have to ask anybody, does that make sense? You know, play a game with magnets like this and explain what is going on with this. And the better that you are at explaining, the better it is for you to be able to reach out to other people and explain it to them. And not having doubts as to saying, well, I'm not sure if this is, you know, if this is correct. Well, you have your philosophy and you look at the way the magnets have their philosophy and see if the two meet. And if they don't meet, well, then, you know, someone is wrong. And probably it's you, because the magnets are very well organized. And no one got hurt. This is why peace on earth is so important, because peace in the universe is vital. It is sacrosanct. Thank you all for letting me produce this today, and thank you for listening and participating. I hope you enjoyed the experience.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much.
Yes, he did mention magnets in that meeting, that if, when you try to push them, he was trying to, what did he say here? Let's just see if I can find that there. When you arrive, you are a man of peace. When you arrive, there are no wrong intentions, because the soul will not allow that to take place. Take a magnet and put it in a position, and you see how much more fields you need to exert if you are pushing the magnet to take a new position that it does not allow. It's not allowed. And it's the same with the soul of the man. So apparently the transmutation will happen quite naturally, it seems, but if everything is not correct, how much more you have to push, and it still will not allow it to take that position. It's not allowed. So that's why the thinking, speaking, and acting good, I think, are quite important to this whole process of happening of the transmutation. You cannot push that magnet into place it doesn't want to go. It's not allowed to go into that direction. So I think the ethos of Mitra, again, is quite critical, that we need to carry this now and into the future existence, wherever we are. Even coming back here into the dimension of physicality, we're going to hold up that ethos, I think, so that the next time we want to transmute, it will be there for us. Again, I'm just learning the basics, Alex.
Well, you're doing a great job. And so is everybody in this class, because you can clearly see that everybody is asking for the same thing. They want to understand the terminology to be able to explain it to others and to explain it with confidence.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, doing it will make it like a piece of cake to teach it, in a way. I think this is part of the problem. We haven't done a lot of these things we talk about, and so it makes it kind of, in a way, remote for us, even though we're doing it in the dream state and the rest of it. But we just haven't been able to create that change on our own, more or less. We're learning slowly and gradually. We're being brought into this process. We're all being brought into this process.
Well, there is one thing you do have control over, and that is the change within you. You don't have to ask anybody for permission to do that.
Okay, anyone else want to make any final comments? I'd like to play again a little bit from the Q&A with the Universal Council that was broadcast yesterday, a little bit more on the transmutation process, and then how we're all connected to the Creator. Direct connection with the Creator was the video, which lasts about 8 or 9 minutes. I think it's, again, it's also instructive. We just need to internalize it and apply it more and more. But as I said, the sessions that are going on now till June will help in this, and then it will be extended more. The system will be developed more, and perhaps even for a quicker understanding of this knowledge and the ability that we all have to do some of the things that we thought were just science fiction. From feeding to traveling to wellness to energy production. I think we're going to understand all of it deeper and deeper as we go along here. Any other comments from anyone before we close? And again, I'd just like you all, I want to thank you for being here and sharing part of your day with us today. And through 24, keep this in your mind. May you be proud of the work you do, the person you are, and the difference you make. Thank you all for being here and bringing the change.